My name is Amelia Hayes, and this is an invitation to my own personal nightmare. It arrived this morning, nestled between a Pottery Barn catalog and a bill for my utilities. The cardstock is thick, probably 100-pound weight, with beveled gold leaf edges. The kind of paper that whispers, "This cost more than your electric bill." The calligraphy is flawless, a swirling, perfect script that I recognize instantly. It belongs to my sister, Clara, and the names written in that perfect script, joined by a delicate ampersand, are hers and that of my fiancé. Or rather, my ex-fiancé, Ethan. They're getting married. In 6 weeks. At the Street Regis, in the grand ballroom overlooking the city skyline, the very same venue Ethan and I had toured just 4 months ago. The invitation is a masterclass in passive aggression. At the bottom, in that same beautiful flowing handwriting, is a personal note. "Amy," it reads, "it would mean the world to us if you were there to witness our special day. We want to share our happiness with you, all our love, Clara and Ethan. Witness." They didn't say celebrate. They didn't say be a part of. They said witness. Like I'm a spectator at a public execution. My own. They want me to sit in a gilded chair, wearing a dress I probably can't afford, and watch the man who swore he would love me forever pledge his life to the one person who swore she'd always have my back. They don't just want to be happy. They want to see me watch them be happy. They want to know they've won. My hands aren't shaking. My heart isn't racing. For a long time after it all happened, I felt like a building that had been hollowed out by a fire. Just a fragile shell waiting for the slightest breeze to crumble into dust. But holding this invitation, feeling the weight of their audacity in my hands, I don't feel fragile anymore. I feel the foundation settling. I feel the steel beams inside me, the ones I forgot I had, beginning to glow with a quiet, dangerous heat. You see, my sister and my ex-fiancé have made a terrible mistake. It's not that they betrayed me. People do that. It happens every day. Their mistake wasn't inviting me to their wedding. Their mistake was thinking I was the same woman they left behind. They think they know me. They think I'm Amelia Hayes, the quiet architect, the reliable older sister, the good girl who always plays by the rules, the one who designs sturdy, dependable buildings while Clara, my younger sister, designs a life of fleeting, glamorous moments for her 2 million Instagram followers. They think I'll either politely decline, or worse, show up with my eyes puffy from crying, proving to all their friends and our family just how broken I am. They've built their entire future on a foundation of lies, believing I was just part of the rubble they cleared away to make room for it. But as an architect, I know something about foundations. I know that even the most beautiful structure will collapse if it's built on unstable ground. And the ground Clara and Ethan are standing on is about to give way to a sinkhole. They don't know my secret. They don't know what our grandfather, the patriarch of the Hayes family and the founder of the empire Ethan is so desperate to marry into, left for me. They don't know the power I now hold. They wanted a show. They wanted me to witness their triumph. Oh, I'll be there. I'll be sitting in the front row with a smile on my face, and I will give them a show they will never, ever forget. Because this isn't just their wedding, it's a demolition, and I'm the one holding the detonator. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever been told to just be the bigger person in the face of an impossible betrayal, then you're going to want to see how this story ends. Hit that like button and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss a single moment of what's coming. This is the story of how my sister stole my fiancé and my life, and how I took it all back with interest. Before I tell you about the plan that began to form the moment I read that invitation, you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand the world I lived in, the one Clara and Ethan so casually destroyed. Ethan and I met 5 years ago. It was one of those cliché, movie-perfect moments. We were at a charity gala for the preservation of historic city landmarks. I was there because I genuinely cared. My work as an architect is rooted in a deep respect for the structures that came before me. He was there because his company had bought a table. He was a rising star in finance, a vice president at a private equity firm, with a smile that could disarm world leaders and eyes that made you feel like you were the only person in a crowded room. He walked right up to me while I was studying a blueprint of a 1,920 seconds theater they were trying to save. He didn't use a cheap pickup line. He asked me about the load-bearing walls and the challenges of retrofitting the original Art Deco facade. He was intelligent, engaged, and for the first time in a long time, someone seemed to see me, not as Clara's quiet, serious sister, but as Amelia. Our courtship was a whirlwind of beautiful moments that felt solid, real, and structurally sound. We spent weekends exploring old buildings, hiking in the Hudson Valley, and cooking elaborate meals in my small but sunny apartment. He loved my passion for my work. He'd listen for hours as I talked about the poetry of a well-placed window or the integrity of a handcrafted dovetail joint. He was my biggest cheerleader, the one who encouraged me to leave the large, soulless firm I was with and start my own boutique architectural practice. "You're too talented to just be a cog in a machine, Amy," he'd say, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "You're meant to build your own monuments." And with his encouragement, I did. I poured my life savings into Hayes Designs, and for 2 years, I worked tirelessly, building a reputation for thoughtful, sustainable, and deeply personal architectural work. It was a struggle, but it was mine. And then there was Clara, my beautiful, effervescent, magnetic sister. Growing up, Clara was the sun, and I was the planet that quietly orbited her, happy to exist in her warmth and reflected light. She was the one who could charm our parents into anything, the one whose scraped knee warranted more attention than my straight-A report card. I was the responsible one. She was the spontaneous one. I was the planner. She was the party. I never resented her for it. It was just the way things were. Her career as a lifestyle influencer took off like a rocket. She had a gift for making everything look effortless and beautiful. Her life, as curated on social media, was a pastel-colored dream of brunch spots, designer outfits, and exotic vacations. She was selling an aspiration, and millions of people were buying it. When I introduced her to Ethan, I was so proud. I had my steady, brilliant partner, and she had her global adoration. We were the Hayes sisters, successful in our own different worlds. Clara adored Ethan. "Oh, Amy, you finally snagged a great one," she'd squeal. "He's perfect. So handsome, so successful. Don't mess this up." She became a constant presence in our lives. She'd drop by my apartment unannounced when Ethan was over, bringing champagne or some new gourmet cheese she was promoting. She'd insert herself into our weekend plans. "You guys are going hiking? Ugh, bugs. Why don't you come to this amazing rooftop pool party with me instead? Ethan would love it." Ethan, always eager to be accommodating, would often agree. I started to feel like a third wheel in my own relationship. I'd be talking about a breakthrough with a difficult client, and Clara would interrupt with a dramatic story about a brand deal gone wrong, instantly capturing Ethan's attention. He'd shift from listening to me to consoling her, his brow furrowed with the same concern he used to reserve for me. The change was subtle, like hairline fractures appearing in a foundation. You don't notice them at first, but they're there, quietly compromising the integrity of the entire structure. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just being an insecure older sister. Clara had always been the center of attention. Why should this be any different? The proposal was breathtaking. It was on the anniversary of the night we met, on the rooftop of a building I had helped design, overlooking the entire city. Ethan got down on one knee, holding a custom-designed ring with a flawless emerald-cut diamond. He spoke of our future, of building a life together, a home, a family. He said he loved my quiet strength, my integrity, my soul. I cried. I said yes. I had never been happier. The first person I called was Clara. She screamed with delight. "It's about time. "I'm planning the engagement party," she declared. And she did. The party was a spectacular affair at a chic downtown loft, every detail perfect for her Instagram feed. She gave a toast that night, champagne flute in her hand. To my sister, Amelia, who has always been the rock of our family. And to Ethan, for finally seeing what I've seen all my life, how incredible She Island. It sounded perfect. But as she spoke, she placed her hand on Ethan's arm, her fingers lingering just a little too long. And I saw him glance at her, just for a second, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the look he gave me. It was something else. Something I filed away. Another hairline crack I chose to ignore. The 9 months between our engagement and the implosion were a masterclass in psychological warfare, though I didn't see it that way at the time. I just saw it as wedding planning. And Clara, in her self-appointed role as the ultimate maid of honor, was involved in every single decision. She had opinions on everything, from the floral arrangements to the font on the save the dates. Oh, Amy, calla lilies are so predictable. Don't you want something more unique? More you? She'd say, flipping through a magazine. Of course, her suggestions were always more expensive, more dramatic, more Clara. I was working incredibly long hours at my firm, trying to land a major contract that would finally make my business secure, so I was grateful for the help. Or at least, I told myself I was. In reality, it felt like my wedding was being slowly hijacked. Ethan, bless his heart, seemed to think Clara's involvement was wonderful. "It's great that you two are so close," he'd say, kissing my forehead as I stressed over catering menus. "She's just trying to make sure your day is perfect." He was often the tiebreaker in our little planning debates, and he almost always sided with Clara. "I think your sister has a point, Honorable. The string quartet does feel more elegant than a DJ." Each time it felt like a tiny betrayal, a small shifting of allegiance that I couldn't quite put my finger on. They started having meetings without me. "Just preliminary vendor stuff, Amy. We don't want to bother you with the boring details," Clara would chirp. They developed a shorthand, a set of inside jokes. They started finishing each other's sentences. I felt a growing sense of unease, a cold dread that I kept pushing down, telling myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. I was designing a life with this man, and yet I was starting to feel like I was being written out of the blueprints. The discovery, when it came, wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't me walking in on them in a compromising position. It was quieter, colder, and 1,000 times more brutal. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my office, working on the final presentation for that big contract I was trying to win a commission to design a new wing for the city's modern art museum. It was the kind of project that could define a career. I was exhausted but exhilarated. Ethan was supposed to be on a business trip to San Francisco. He'd called me that morning from his hotel room telling me how much he missed me. I was searching my inbox for a structural engineering report when I saw it. An email from a boutique hotel in Napa Valley. The subject line was, "Your romantic getaway confirmation." I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The confirmation was for a 2-night stay in the honeymoon suite, starting that very night. There was a reservation for a private wine tasting and a couple's massage. And the names on the reservation were Mr. Ethan Reed and Miss Clara Hayes. Time stopped. The sounds of my office, the clicking of keyboards, the low hum of the printer faded into a dull roar. I read the names again, and again. It had to be a mistake, a typo. I forwarded the email to my personal address and then checked Ethan's location. We had a location sharing app on our phones, a silly practical thing we used for coordinating groceries. I always forgot about it. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. The little blue dot with Ethan's face wasn't in San Francisco. It was pulsing steadily in Napa Valley, right over the exact location of the hotel. He hadn't just lied about where he was. He had constructed an entire fictional business trip, complete with fake morning phone calls, just to be with my sister. I don't remember the drive home. I think I was on autopilot, my mind a blank slate of white-hot shock. I walked into our apartment, the one we had picked out together, and just stood in the middle of the living room. Everything looked the same: his favorite leather armchair, the stack of his magazines on the coffee table, the photo of us on the mantel, smiling on the day we got engaged. But it was all a lie, a movie set. None of it was real. I started packing a bag. Not for him, for me. I was throwing clothes into a suitcase when I heard the key in the door. I froze. He wasn't supposed to be back for 2 days. He walked in, pulling a rolling suitcase, looking surprised to see me. "Amy, what are you doing home so early?" he asked, a perfect mask of confusion on his face. "My meetings ended sooner than expected. I wanted to surprise you." His lie was so effortless, so smooth. It was breathtaking. Behind him, Clara appeared in the doorway, a nervous smile plastered on her face. "We ran into each other at the airport. Can you believe it? What a coincidence," she trilled. The two of them standing there, expecting me to believe this pathetic, insulting story. I just stared at them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a terrifying calm settle over me. I held up my phone, the hotel confirmation glowing on the screen. "Napa," I said. My voice was flat, dead. The honeymoon suite. The couple's massage. Was that a coincidence too? The color drained from both of their faces. Ethan's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Clara's smile evaporated, replaced by a flicker of panic. It was Ethan who broke the silence, and his words would haunt me for months. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He sighed, a sound of weary resignation, as if I was the one creating a problem. "Amy, look, it's complicated," he began. Clara jumped in, her voice taking on a tearful, victimized tone. "We didn't want you to find out like this. We were going to tell you. We fell in love, Amy. It just happened. We couldn't fight it. We never meant to hurt you." The audacity of that sentence, "we never meant to hurt you," as they stood there, fresh from a romantic getaway paid for with the money he was supposed to be saving for our future, was staggering. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was a coup. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had been planning my removal. The confrontation that followed wasn't a fiery explosion. It was a slow, agonizing demolition. They stood there in my living room, the living room I was about to be evicted from emotionally, and presented their love story as if it were some grand, tragic romance they were helpless to resist. Ethan finally found his voice, not one of regret, but one of justification. "I love you, Amy. I always will," he said, which is a universally recognized opening line for the most profound cruelty. "But the love I have for Clara, it's different. It's passionate. We connect on a level you and I never did." He was rewriting our history in real time, turning our steady, supportive love into something passionless and dull to justify his betrayal. He was painting me as the sensible, boring choice, and Clara as the exciting, inevitable one. He was turning me into the prequel of his real love story. Clara, meanwhile, had perfected the role of the reluctant homewrecker. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes were cold and watchful, gauging my reaction. "I've fought this for so long, Amy," she sobbed, clutching Ethan's arm. "You're my sister. The last thing I ever wanted to do was cause you pain. But we have something real, something undeniable." They were a united front, a tag team of emotional manipulation. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry I had found out. They were sorry I was making it difficult. They wanted my permission, my blessing even, to absolve them of their guilt. I looked at the engagement ring on my finger, the one Ethan had called a symbol of our unbreakable bond. I slowly twisted it off and held it out to him. I didn't throw it. I didn't make a scene. I placed it in his palm, my hand as steady as a surgeon's. "You'll need this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Her ring size is a half size smaller than mine. That one detail, That small, intimate piece of knowledge seemed to shatter their composure more than any screaming fit could have. It was a reminder that I had been there first, that I knew things about them they had conveniently forgotten. I left that night with one suitcase and a shattered life. I went to my best friend Maya's apartment, the one person in the world I knew I could trust. I collapsed on her couch, and finally, the dam broke. I sobbed for hours. A deep, guttural grief for the man I thought I knew, the sister I thought I had, and the future I had so meticulously designed. The days that followed are a blur of pain. I broke the lease on our apartment. I called my parents to tell them the wedding was off. My mother's reaction was crushingly predictable. After a moment of shocked silence, her first question was, "Oh, honey, what did you do?" The implication was clear. It had to be my fault. I must have been too focused on my career, too distant, too something. When I told her the truth, that Ethan was with Clara, there was another pause. And then, well, Clara has always been very charming. Men are drawn to her. You know how she island. There was no outrage on my behalf. There was a quiet, resigned acceptance, as if Clara's happiness, no matter how it was achieved, was the natural order of things. I hit rock bottom. I stopped going to the office. I lost the museum contract because I missed the final presentation. My fledgling firm, my dream, was on the verge of collapse. I was living on Maya's sofa, subsisting on takeout and her unwavering, fierce friendship. "They are not worth the air you're wasting crying over them, Amy," she'd say, forcing a forkful of pad that into my mouth. "We are going to rebuild, brick by brick." It was during that dark, hopeless period that the letter arrived. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize, Abernathy and Crowe. It was addressed to me, forwarded from my old apartment. The letter was from the executor of my grandfather's estate. My grandfather, Richard Hayes, had passed away 2 years prior. He was the founder of Hayes Industries, a massive manufacturing and logistics conglomerate. He was a brilliant, no-nonsense man who had built an empire from scratch. He was also the only person in my family who had ever truly seen me. He loved Clara's sparkle, but he admired my steel. He was the one who had given me my first drafting set, who had studied my childish blueprints with the seriousness of a seasoned engineer. "You have a builder's soul, Amelia," he used to say. "Never let anyone tell you that's less valuable than a showman's charm." His death had devastated me. I had assumed his will was straightforward. The bulk of the company and the estate had been placed in a family trust, managed by my parents, to be passed down to the next generation. I had never thought much about it, but this letter was a summons. Mr. Abernathy, my grandfather's longtime lawyer and friend, wanted to see me. When I met him in his mahogany-paneled office, he looked at me with kind, sad eyes. "Your grandfather was a very wise man, Amelia," he began. "He worried about the future of his legacy. He saw your father's business acumen, but he also saw his blind spots, and he saw the different natures of you and your sister." He then explained something that changed everything. My grandfather had created a separate, secret trust, a failsafe. This trust held a significant, non-voting but financially critical portion of the family's assets. More importantly, it held the deed to the most valuable commercial properties the company owned. And he had made me the sole beneficiary. But there was a catch, a clause that was both brilliant and devastatingly prophetic. The trust would only transfer to my control under one of two conditions: on my 40th birthday, or upon my marriage to a partner who, in the executor's judgment, exhibited sound moral character and unwavering loyalty. He had set it up as my wedding present, a way to secure my future. However, he had also included a codicil, a final amendment written shortly before he died. It stated that, in the event of an act of profound betrayal or moral failing by a member of the immediate family that directly harmed me, the executor had the discretion to grant me full and immediate control of the trust. Mr. Abernathy slid a file across the desk. "I've been made aware of the situation with your sister and Mr. Reed," he said gently. "In my professional and personal opinion, This situation qualifies as a profound betrayal. The choice, however, is yours. We can enact the clause, and control of the trust, and the significant financial power that comes with it, will pass to you. Immediately. I stared at the file, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just money. It was power. It was leverage. It was the ultimate vote of confidence from the one man who had always believed in me. Clara and Ethan thought they were marrying into the Hayes Empire. They had no idea that a critical piece of its foundation was about to land squarely in my hands. The grief and helplessness that had consumed me for weeks began to recede, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a builder. And I was about to draw up a brand new blueprint. For 5 months, I lived in a self-imposed exile from my family. I ignored their calls, their texts, their half-hearted attempts at creating a new normal. My mother would text me things like, "Clara is asking about you. She's worried." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. Clara wasn't worried about me. She was worried about her image. An estranged sister cast a shadow on the perfect life she was curating online. During this time, I worked with Mr. Abernathy to quietly and methodically assume control of the trust. It was a complex process, a deep dive into financial statements, property deeds, and corporate structures that made my head spin. But with every document I signed, with every asset that was transferred into my name, I felt a piece of myself being reclaimed. I was no longer defined by Ethan's rejection or Clara's betrayal. I was defined by my grandfather's faith in me. I also threw myself back into my work. Fueled by a new, almost frantic energy, I rebuilt my firm. I hired 2 junior architects and a project manager. I took on every project I could, big or small, working with a focus and clarity I hadn't had before. The pain was still there, a constant, dull ache in my chest, but I learned to build around it. I was constructing a new life, and the scaffolding was made of late nights, hard work, and an unshakable determination to not just survive, but to build something so magnificent that the ruins of my old life would be nothing but a distant memory. I was in a client meeting, presenting a design for a lakeside retreat, when the invitation arrived at my new office. My assistant brought it in, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and pity. She knew the story. Everyone in my small circle knew. Seeing that creamy envelope with Clara's perfect handwriting felt like a ghost walking through the door. That night, I sat in my new apartment, a place I had chosen and paid for myself, a place that held no memories of him, with the invitation lying on my coffee table like a bomb. My first instinct was to burn it, to shred it into 1,000 pieces and let the wind carry the ashes away, to simply RSVP no and be done with it, to let them have their perfect day and their perfect life without me. Why would I subject myself to that kind of torture? Maya came over, a bottle of expensive tequila in hand. She found me staring at the invitation, lost in thought. "So, the Queen of Passive Aggression has sent her royal decree," she said, pouring 2 generous shots. "What's the plan? Are we sending back a box of glitter? A singing telegram with a list of their sins? Or are we just going to block and delete?" I shook my head. "I don't know, Maya. I think I have to go." Maya choked on her tequila. "Go? Are you insane? Amy, no. Why would you put yourself through that? What could you possibly gain from watching those 2 sociopaths exchange vows?" Her concern was a warm blanket, and for a moment I wanted to wrap myself in it and hide. But the woman I was becoming couldn't hide. "Because they expect me not to," I said slowly, the idea taking shape as I spoke. "They want me to be a ghost at their feast. They want our family, our friends, to see me as the tragic figure, the jilted fiancé who couldn't bear to show her face. My absence confirms their narrative, that their love was so powerful and epic that it left devastation in its wake, that I was the collateral damage of a great romance. I stood up and started pacing, the energy thrumming through me. "They've spent months curating this story, Maya. Clara's Instagram is full of it. Captions about unexpected love, and finding your soulmate when you least expect it. She's painted herself as the heroine of a romance novel. Ethan is the dashing prince. And I'm the sad, forgotten chapter they had to get through to find their happy ending. So what? Maya countered. Who cares what they think? You know the truth. But they don't, I said, my voice hardening. And neither does Ethan. He left me because he thought Clara was the better deal. The fun one, the famous one, the one with the direct line to the Hayes family fortune. He made a calculated business decision. He thinks he's marrying the son, the heiress to an empire. He has no idea he's about to sign a contract with a subsidiary that's about to be dismantled. Maya's eyes widened as she started to understand. You're not going as a victim, she whispered. You're going as a shareholder. A slow smile spread across my face. I'm going as the majority shareholder, I corrected her. They've invited me to witness their union. They want a performance. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to be the perfect guest. I'm going to be gracious and poised, and I am going to smile. And then, at the opportune moment, I'm going to give a toast. The plan was audacious. It was terrifying. It was the most alive I had felt in months. For weeks, I had been reacting to their betrayal, to my parents' apathy, to my financial struggles. This was the first time I was choosing to act. I wasn't just defending myself. I was going on the offensive. I wasn't just rebuilding my own life. I was about to fundamentally restructure theirs. I picked up the RSVP card. It had two options: joyfully accepts and regretfully declines. I took a pen, and with a steady hand, I checked the box next to joyfully accepts. Then I added my own note at the bottom. Clara and Ethan, I wrote. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I am so looking forward to celebrating your new foundation together. All my love, Amelia. Let them puzzle over that. Let them think I was either completely broken or had graciously moved on. The truth was far more complicated and far more devastating. The countdown had begun. 6 weeks until the wedding. 6 weeks to prepare for the performance of a lifetime. The 6 weeks leading up to the wedding were the most intensely focused period of my life. I became the architect of my own vindication, and I approached the project with the same meticulous detail and unwavering precision that I brought to designing a skyscraper. Every action, every decision, was a calculated step in building the structure of my response. My days were spent running my now thriving firm, but my nights were dedicated to what I secretly called the Street Regis Project. My first step was a series of long, intensive meetings with Mr. Abernathy. We went over the Hayes Industries portfolio with a fine-tooth comb. He was a cautious, old-school lawyer, and at first he was wary of my plan. Amelia, a wedding reception is hardly the appropriate venue for a corporate restructuring, he'd warned, peering at me over his spectacles. I understand that, Mr. Abernathy, I'd replied calmly. But you didn't know my grandfather. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a master of theater. He would have appreciated the poetry of this. This isn't a corporate action. It's a family matter that just happens to have significant corporate implications. He eventually came around, won over by my logic and perhaps by a grudging respect for my audacity, which he admitted was very much like my grandfather's. Together, we prepared the necessary documents: notifications for the board of directors, letters to the financial institutions, and a clear, undeniable summary of the assets under my control. We discovered the full extent of my family's financial troubles, which were even worse than I had imagined. My father, in an attempt to keep up with a changing market, had made a series of risky, ill-advised investments. The company was leveraged to the hilt. The only things keeping it afloat were its reputation and the hard assets, the very properties that I now controlled. Ethan wasn't just marrying into a family. He was marrying into a house of cards, and he didn't even know it. I used my architectural software, the same programs I used to create 3D models of buildings, to create a different kind of presentation. I designed a series of simple, elegant infographics that laid out the financial situation in stark, undeniable terms. The company's debt-to-asset ratio, the declining profits, and a pie chart showing the percentage of the company's actual value that was tied up in the properties held by my trust. It was a visual story of a slow-motion collapse. I saved it to a small, sleek thumb drive that I kept in a locked drawer in my desk. The second part of my preparation was my physical appearance. This wasn't about vanity. It was about armor. I knew every eye at that wedding would be on me, searching for cracks in my facade. They would be looking for a woman who was heartbroken, fragile, and defeated. I was determined to give them the opposite. I hired a personal trainer and worked out with a vengeance, channeling my anger and grief into strength. I booked a series of appointments with a top stylist. We weren't looking for a revenge dress, that over-the-top, look-at-me garment. That was Clara's style. We chose something else entirely. We found a dress by a designer known for minimalist, powerful silhouettes. It was a floor-length sheath of the deepest emerald green silk, a color that symbolized renewal and wealth. It was impeccably tailored, with long sleeves and a high neckline. It was a dress that didn't scream for attention. It commanded it. It was the dress of a CEO, not a jilted lover. I bought new shoes, new jewelry, subtle, expensive pieces that whispered of success, not desperation. Every element was chosen to project an aura of serene, unshakable confidence. The final and most difficult part of my preparation was emotional. I had to learn how to face them without letting a single flicker of my true feelings show. I rehearsed in my mind, over and over again, the things they would say, the looks they would give me. I practiced my smile in the mirror, training it to be warm but impenetrable. Maya was my sparring partner. She would play the part of Clara, saying the most outrageously condescending things she could think of. "Oh, Amy, I'm so glad you're not bitter. It's so much more dignified," she'd say in a high, chirpy voice. My job was to respond with grace and calm, to not rise to the bait. We did it for hours, until my smile felt natural, until my polite responses were second nature. I was also preparing my speech. I didn't write it all down. I didn't want it to sound rehearsed. I wanted it to sound spontaneous, heartfelt, and utterly devastating. I created a set of bullet points on an index card, the key facts and figures, the turning points of my narrative. I memorized the flow, the rhythm, the emotional arc of it. It would start with warmth, move to confusion, then to dawning horror, and end with cold, hard, inescapable truth. A week before the wedding, Clara called me. It was the first time we'd spoken since the confrontation. "Amy, I'm so glad I caught you," she bubbled, as if nothing had happened. "We're doing the seating chart, and I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable. We were thinking of putting you at a table with some of our old high school friends. We thought it might be less awkward for you." The condescension was breathtaking. She wasn't just offering me a seat. She was managing me, trying to tuck me away in a corner where I couldn't cause any trouble. "That's so thoughtful of you, Clara," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "But you don't need to worry about that. I'm family. Please, just put me at the main family table. I insist. I wouldn't want Mom and Dad to think there were any hard feelings." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I had called her bluff. She couldn't refuse without admitting that there were hard feelings, that the situation was awkward. "Oh, okay, of course, Amy," she said, her voice a little tighter. "The family table at Island. We'll see you Saturday." As I hung up the phone, I smiled. The stage was set. My seat was secured, and the guest of honor was ready for her performance. The day of the wedding arrived with a sky of brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind of perfect, picturesque day that Clara would have undoubtedly claimed she had personally manifested for her Instagram feed. As I got ready, I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes before a major presentation or a final exam. I had done the work. I had studied my materials. I knew my lines. Now, All I had to do was execute. Dressed in my emerald silk armor, with my hair swept up in an elegant, severe chignon, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The haunted, heartbroken girl from 3 months ago was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she owned the building she was standing in. And in a way, she was about to. I took a car service to the Street Regis, arriving deliberately 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. I wanted to make an entrance, but not a loud one. I wanted to be seen, to be observed, before the main event. As I stepped out of the black car and into the opulent lobby of the hotel, a wave of whispers followed me. Friends of the family, business associates of my father, all turned to look. Their faces were a mixture of pity, curiosity, and morbid fascination. I was the spectacle they had all come to see. I smiled serenely at anyone who caught my eye, a queen surveying her slightly uncomfortable court. I walked into the pre-ceremony reception area, a grand foyer dripping with crystals and overflowing with white roses, Clara's flower of choice. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the low hum of polite conversation. I spotted my parents immediately. My mother was fluttering around, adjusting floral arrangements and greeting guests. A brittle smile stretched across her face. My father stood in a corner with a group of his business cronies, laughing a little too loudly. My mother saw me first. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she pasted it back on and rushed toward me. "Amelia, darling, you came!" she exclaimed, her voice an octave too high. She embraced me in a stiff hug, her hands patting my back awkwardly. "You look so well." It was meant as a compliment, but it was also a question. "Why aren't you a wreck?" "I feel well, Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. I pulled back and looked her in the eye. "It's a beautiful venue. You and Clara did a wonderful job." Before she could respond, my father joined us. He gave me a curt nod, his eyes assessing my appearance. "Amelia," he said, his tone gruff. "Good of you to come. Shows character." It was the closest he could come to acknowledging the difficulty of the situation. He was a man who valued appearances above all else, and my presence here today was the ultimate act of keeping up appearances. It meant he didn't have to answer uncomfortable questions from his friends about his fractured family. And then, I saw them. They entered the room from a side door, a radiant, triumphant couple. Clara was a vision in white lace, a custom Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than my first car. Her smile was dazzling, her eyes sparkling with victory. Ethan was by her side, devastatingly handsome in a classic black tuxedo. He looked like the prince from a fairy tale. They moved through the room, a royal couple accepting accolades from their subjects. When Clara finally spotted me, her smile widened. She glided towards me, Ethan in tow. "Amy!" she cried, pulling me into a cloud of tulle and Chanel No. 5. "I'm so happy you're here. It means everything to me." She was performing, and she was brilliant at it. Her voice was filled with a sincerity that was utterly fake, but completely convincing to anyone who didn't know better. "I wouldn't miss it, Clara," I said, my own voice just as sincere. "You look beautiful." Then I turned to Ethan. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. His eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. "Amelia," he said, his voice low. "Thank you for coming. It's good to see you." "You too, Ethan," I replied, giving him a warm, friendly smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You look happy." I let my gaze drift over the two of them, a perfect picture of bliss. "You both do. You seem so well matched." The word hung in the air between us, weighted with unspoken meaning. For a moment, a flicker of unease crossed Ethan's face. He knew me well enough to know that I chose my words carefully. He knew that well-matched could mean more than one thing. But Clara, in her moment of triumph, was oblivious. She just beamed. "We are," she said, squeezing his arm possessively. "We really are." The chimes rang, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Guests began to file into the ballroom. Clara gave me one last, triumphant smile. Enjoy the show, sis, she whispered, before turning and gliding toward the aisle. Oh, I will, I murmured to myself as I found my seat in the front row. I really, really will. The ceremony itself was an out-of-body experience. I sat on a plush, velvet chair between my stoic father and my nervously fidgeting mother, a perfect portrait of the wronged but dignified family member. The ballroom was breathtaking, a sea of white flowers and flickering candlelight, exactly as Clara had described it in our planning meetings. The string quartet played Pichelbel's Canon, the same piece I had told Ethan I wanted from my own walk down the aisle. Every detail was a small, sharp jab, a reminder of the life they had stolen and were now living in front of me. As Clara walked down the aisle on my father's arm, she was radiant. She looked directly at Ethan, her eyes shining with what appeared to be pure love. Ethan, in turn, watched her with an expression of utter adoration. They were incredible actors. They had convinced everyone in this room, and perhaps even themselves, that their love was a force of nature, an epic destiny. I felt nothing. The part of me that should have been shattered, that should have been weeping, was silent. I was an architect, observing a facade, admiring the craftsmanship of the lie while knowing, with absolute certainty, about the rot in the structure beneath. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, full of poetic nonsense about soulmates and cosmic connections. Clara's voice trembled with emotion as she promised to be Ethan's partner in adventure and his calm in the storm. Ethan's voice was deep and steady as he pledged to honor and cherish her for all his days. The officiant, a bland man with a soothing voice, finally reached the part. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. 100 heads turned, almost imperceptibly, in my direction. The air crackled with anticipation. This was the moment from the movies, the dramatic objection, the last-ditch plea. I could feel the weight of their expectations. I did nothing. I simply sat there, a serene smile on my face, and met my mother's anxious gaze with a look of calm reassurance. The moment passed. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Ethan kissed Clara with a dip and a flourish that was clearly rehearsed for the cameras. The crowd erupted in applause. I clapped along with them, my hands making a polite, rhythmic sound that was drowned out by the joyous celebration of my personal apocalypse. The reception was even more opulent. Champagne flowed like water. A jazz band played in the corner. A mountain of shrimp and oysters glistened on a massive ice sculpture carved into their initials. It was a monument to my father's perceived wealth and my sister's impeccable taste. I navigated the cocktail hour with practiced ease, accepting condolences disguised as pleasantries. "You're being so strong, Amelia," a distant aunt whispered, squeezing my arm. "It's wonderful to see you looking so well," a friend of my mother's said, her eyes filled with pity. I thanked them all, my smile never wavering. I was a rock in a river of their discomfort, and my stillness seemed to unnerve them more than any outburst would have. I sat at the family table, directly across from the happy couple. They were in their own little bubble, laughing, kissing, feeding each other bites of artisanal cheese. Every so often, Clara's eyes would flick over to me, a quick, triumphant glance to make sure I was watching. I always met her gaze with a placid smile, giving her nothing. The speeches began. The best man, Ethan's college roommate, told a few sanitized, boring stories about their youthful adventures. Then it was time for my father. He stood up, tapping his glass for attention, his chest puffed out with pride. He looked at Clara and Ethan, his voice booming with emotion. "Today, I am not losing a daughter," he began, the classic tired line. "I am gaining a son. Ethan, my boy. Welcome to the Hayes family." He spoke of Ethan's ambition, his intelligence, his drive. I couldn't have chosen a better man for my Clara. A man who understands the value of legacy, of building something that lasts. I see in you the same fire that my own father, Richard Hayes, had when he built Hayes Industries from the ground up. You are a man worthy of the Hayes name and the prosperity that comes with it. He raised his glass. I know that together, you and Clara will continue to build upon the strong, unshakable foundation that our family has created over generations. To Clara and Ethan, may your life together be as rich and successful as the legacy you are now a part of. The room applauded wildly. Ethan beamed, his face flushed with pride and champagne. He had done it. He had officially been welcomed into the dynasty. My father's words were the perfect setup. The strong, unshakable foundation. The rich and successful legacy. He had just handed me the script for my entire speech. As the applause died down, the DJ announced, "And now, a special toast from the bride's sister, Amelia Hayes." A hush fell over the room. This was it. The moment of truth. Every phone in the room seemed to lift, ready to capture the impending drama. I saw Clara whisper something to Ethan, a smug, anticipatory smile on her face. She thought she knew what was coming. A tearful, rambling, or perhaps a graciously boring toast. She had no idea. I picked up my champagne flute, the cool glass grounding me. I pushed my chair back and rose to my feet. I walked to the microphone, my emerald dress shimmering under the crystal chandeliers. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, but I only looked at 3 people: my father, my sister, and the man she had just married. I smiled my warmest, most disarming smile. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amelia Hayes, Clara's older sister, and I'd like to say a few words about the happy couple, and about the importance of building on a strong foundation." Oh, I let my opening line hang in the air, the phrase, "strong foundation," echoing my father's speech. I saw him nod in approval, pleased that I was playing my part so well. Clara and Ethan were smiling, basking in the glow of what they assumed would be a touching, sisterly tribute. I started with the sincerity they expected. "Clara, my beautiful sister," I said, turning to her, "I have never seen you look more radiant. And Ethan, I've never seen you look happier. Watching you two exchange your vows today, it was clear to everyone in this room that you share something truly powerful." I paused, letting the word powerful settle. Growing up, my father and my grandfather always taught me that the most important thing in life, whether you're building a relationship or a company, is the integrity of the foundation. A structure is only as strong as what it's built on. And for generations, the Hayes family has built its legacy on what we all believed was a foundation of granite: Hayes Industries. I saw my father puff out his chest again, beaming. This was going perfectly from his perspective. My father just spoke of this rich and successful legacy, and he's right. The Hayes name has always been synonymous with success, with unshakable financial strength. I took a small sip of my champagne, then set the glass down. The performance was over. It was time for the reveal. Which is why I was so surprised when, in the course of some recent financial reviews, I discovered that this foundation of granite is actually a foundation of sand. The room went dead silent. The jazz band trailed off mid-note. My father's smile froze on his face, then slowly evaporated. I discovered, I continued, my voice losing its warmth and taking on the cool, precise tone of an architect, presenting a structural analysis, that Hayes Industries is currently leveraged to the tune of $95 million against assets it no longer fully owns. I discovered a series of high-risk investments made over the last 3 years that have resulted in a catastrophic loss of capital. I discovered that the company that has been a symbol of Boston's elite for 50 years is, as of this quarter, on the verge of total, irreversible insolvency. The company is bankrupt. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. My father shot to his feet, his face a mask of purple rage. "Amelia, this is neither the time nor the place. What is the meaning of this?" "Please sit down, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm not finished." I turned my attention to Ethan, whose face had gone completely white. He was staring at my father, then back at me, a look of dawning horror in his eyes. "Ethan," I said, my voice now soft, almost conversational, "you are a brilliant financial mind. You understand numbers, so let me give you a few. The only thing of real, tangible value left in the Hayes family portfolio are the commercial properties, the manufacturing plants, the downtown office building, the logistics hubs. These hard assets are the only reason the banks haven't called in the loans and liquidated the entire company." "And this," I said, looking around the opulent ballroom, "this wedding, this beautiful, extravagant display, is a fantasy, paid for with the last fumes of a dying empire." Clara was now staring at me, her mouth hanging open, her perfect makeup unable to disguise the confusion and fury in her eyes. "What are you talking about, Amy? You're lying!" she shrieked. "Am I?" I asked calmly. I reached into my small, elegant clutch and pulled out the slim thumb drive. This drive contains the company's complete, unredacted financial statements from the last 36 months, along with a detailed analysis of the company's debt. But that's not the most interesting part. I turned back to Ethan. "The most interesting part, Ethan, has to do with those properties I mentioned. You see, what no one in this room knows, what my own parents seem to have forgotten, is that our grandfather, Richard Hayes, was a very shrewd man. He didn't trust my father's more flamboyant investment style. So, years ago, he placed all of those critical properties, the very bedrock of the company, into a separate, private trust." I let that sink in. My mother was now openly weeping. My father looked like he had been struck by lightning. "This trust," I continued, my voice ringing with clarity, "was to be controlled by a single beneficiary. And in a final, brilliant act of foresight, my grandfather included a specific clause in his will, a moral character clause. He stipulated that in the event of a profound act of betrayal by one family member against another, full and immediate control of that trust would be transferred to the wronged party." I locked eyes with Ethan, then with Clara. "So, when my sister decided to have an affair with my fiancé, when they conspired behind my back and destroyed my life, they didn't just break my heart. They enacted a legal document. They triggered a clause in our grandfather's will. As of 3 months ago, I, Amelia Hayes, am the sole controller of that trust. I am the sole owner of every valuable asset that Hayes Industries has left." I let the full weight of my words land. The silence was absolute. "So you see, Ethan," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy, "you thought you were marrying into a powerful, wealthy dynasty. You thought you were securing your future. But what you've actually done is marry the sister with the beautiful Instagram feed, a mountain of debt, and absolutely no access to the family fortune. The fortune you thought you were getting? It's mine. All of it." I looked at Clara, whose face was a grotesque mask of shock and hatred. "You can have the man, Clara. You can have the title of Mrs. Reed. But the legacy, the foundation, the empire? That belongs to me." I raised my now empty champagne flute. "So, a toast to the happy couple. May your marriage be built on something more solid than your financial prospects. Because from where I'm standing, your foundation is non-existent. Cheers." I placed the microphone back in its stand, picked up my clutch, and with the eyes of every single person in that room on me, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of their perfect wedding behind me. The sound of the heavy ballroom doors closing behind me was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a chapter ending, a prison door swinging shut on my past. I didn't run. I walked, my footsteps echoing on the marble floors of the St. Regis lobby. I didn't look back. I could feel the shock waves from the explosion I had detonated, the pandemonium that must have erupted in that room, but it was no longer my concern. The doorman, with a flicker of confusion at my abrupt departure, hailed me a cab. As I settled into the back seat, and the car pulled away from the curb, I saw the first few guests stumbling out of the hotel. their faces pale with shock and excitement, already on their phones, spreading the story of the most catastrophic wedding Boston society had ever seen. I didn't go to Maya's. I didn't go to a bar to celebrate. I went home, to my quiet, peaceful apartment. I took off the emerald green dress, my beautiful armor, and hung it carefully in my closet. I washed the makeup from my face, and for the first time in months, the woman I saw in the mirror looked truly, completely free. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By the next morning, the story was the only thing anyone in my family circle was talking about. Clara's social media was a dumpster fire. Her carefully curated image of a fairy tale romance had been nuked from orbit. She was exposed as a homewrecker who had made a catastrophic financial miscalculation. Her comment section was a brutal mix of outrage from former fans and mockery from an entertained public. She deactivated her account within 24 hours. Ethan, I heard through the grapevine, disappeared. He didn't go on the lavish honeymoon to Bora Bora. He packed his bags and left the new apartment he and Clara had rented. A man like Ethan, whose entire identity was built on ambition and strategic alliances, could not survive public humiliation on that scale. He had bet everything on the Hayes name, only to discover he had sided with the losing faction. His career in finance, which relies so heavily on reputation and trust, was left in tatters. My parents tried to contact me, of course. My father left a string of furious, rambling voicemails, threatening legal action, accusing me of destroying the family. My mother sent long, tearful texts, begging me to reconsider, to think of the family's reputation. I didn't respond to any of them. I had said everything I needed to say. Instead, I went to work. With Mr. Abernathy by my side, I called an emergency meeting with the board of Hayes Industries and the consortium of banks that held our debt. I laid out the truth of the company's financial situation, and then I presented my plan. It was a radical restructuring. I would use the assets from my trust not to bail out the company, but as leverage. I would sell off the underperforming divisions, streamline operations, and invest heavily in the parts of the business that were still profitable. It was a brutal, difficult plan that would involve layoffs and the end of the company as my father knew it. But it was also the only way to save it, to save the jobs of the hundreds of employees who depended on it. 6 months later, life was unrecognizable. Hayes Industries no longer existed. In its place was the Hayes North Group, a smaller, leaner, more modern company built around the core manufacturing and logistics assets I had inherited. I wasn't the CEO. I had no desire to run my grandfather's company, but as the majority shareholder and chairwoman of the board, I had hired a brilliant team to manage it. My own firm, Hayes Designs, had landed the museum contract after all. The board had been so impressed with my handling of the Hayes Industries crisis that they had revisited my proposal and awarded me the project. It was the ultimate validation, a recognition of my talent that had nothing to do with my family name. My relationship with my family is a work in progress. It is a structure that had to be demolished down to the studs and is now being slowly, cautiously rebuilt. My father, after months of angry silence, finally requested a meeting. He was a changed man, humbled and visibly aged. We sat in my office, the one I had built for myself, and he offered a quiet, stilted apology. He didn't understand my world, he admitted, but he understood power, and he respected what I had done. We are not close, but we are civil. We are building a new foundation, one based on a clear-eyed respect rather than flawed expectations. My mother and I are in therapy together. We are unpacking decades of dysfunctional dynamics, her favoritism, my invisibility. It is painful, difficult work, but for the first time she is trying to see me as I am. I never heard from Ethan again. I have no idea where he is, and I have no desire to find out. Clara moved to Los Angeles. She re-emerged on social media a few months ago with a new brand, a wellness and spirituality guru, writing long captions about forgiveness, healing from trauma, and letting go of materialism. Her past has been conveniently erased. I see her sometimes when I'm scrolling through my phone. I feel a flicker of something, not anger, not sadness, just a distant clinical pity. She is still building beautiful facades, still selling a fantasy. Some people never learn. The greatest lesson I've learned from all of this is something my grandfather tried to teach me long ago. A life, like a building, has to have integrity. It has to be built on truth, on a solid foundation of self-worth. For years, I sought validation from people who were incapable of giving it. I thought I needed their approval to feel whole. The irony is that it wasn't until I lost everything that I found the one thing that truly mattered: myself. My name is Amelia Hayes. I am an architect, and I am finally living in a house of my own design. A house built not on lies or legacies, but on the simple, unshakable truth of who I am. And from here, the view is magnificent.